So, yes. So my name is Victoria. I'm the chairperson of the EMC board. I'm white, middle height, blonde, and also turning into my 40s. And if you're wondering why I tell you this about myself, it's just to make sure that if someone is visually impaired in here or watching us online, they also have a chance to understand better what I look like. And I have a lovely panel. You get to describe yourself if you want to. Diverse panel, I would say. Thank you for your questions. I think this is exactly what we will now go into. We will have 4 project presentations and a round of questions, and then we'll open up to more questions. And then we have the focus groups afterwards, so it's really, I'm happy that we have a full morning for this. Because, yeah, in 2017, Me Too shook the world, and what has happened since? And did it just die out, or did a lot of things happen? I think with this we'll dig into now. And I will start with Harrie van den Elsen, former director of Conservatory of Maastricht, former director of Conservatory of Groningen, former Secretary General of EAC, and soon former board member of EMC. And as you see, Harrie is taking the place of Gretchen, who unfortunately couldn't travel, but we're very happy to have you, and you will present the PRIhME project.
Good morning, everyone. I'm stepping in for Gretchen Amussen, who was not able to travel, so I'm binary in a way as well, replacing Gretchen and being myself. As Victoria said, I'm taking the ground for the European conservatoires here, and we have a project which is called PRIhME. You can see it now on stage, on the big screen. It's power relations in higher music education. So it's not only about gender equity, but it's a much broader theme, power relations. And that's what triggered all what has happened in recent years for AEC to look at this problem. Not only about the gender, the balance problem, but also about all the other problems related to power, in our case then, conservatoires in Europe and beyond. And that's why we made this project. And the overall objective for PRIhME was to search and find recommendations for higher music education institutions. How can we improve the HMEI stands for Higher Music Education Institutions? How can we improve their environment by suggesting ways to deal with power relations within our institutions? And what standards are realistic to set up and achieve a safer and more supportive environment for all stakeholders, be they students, teachers, or administrative staff? And the form we chose was also, at least for us, a new form. We call it the form of participatory democracy. It's on the screen here now as well. A form of participatory democracy. And that's why we asked 9 conservatoires spread out over Europe to participate in this project. And you see their names from Dublin till Kharkiv. And we call it stakeholder assemblies. So it's not a questionnaire, it's not a congress, it's not a more traditional way of connecting to people, but it's a stakeholder assembly. In order to find expertise and documentation, to have a discussion and debate, and of course, to formulate, in the end, recommendations for the higher music education sector. And these were the topics which the assemblies had to address. Understanding power relations and hierarchies and their role within music education. And I suppose you know quite well higher music education. These are conservatoires, music universities, which are very special forms of education with very one-to-one situations. So power relations are really a big topic in in higher music education. And of course, special topic was gender and sexual orientation. And then also the intersectionality comes up if you talk about the socioeconomic background and disability, so it's beyond, so to say, to address to the former speaker. And also about artistic standards. Perhaps that's a bit surprising, but artistic standards are also very individual, and power relations have a huge influence on the artistic standards of both professors and students. Well, the assemblies consisted of 55 persons, staff, students and administrative staff from these 9 conservatoires. And they sort of created a safe space in which they could discuss these themes and topics. In these assemblies you raise awareness and understanding, you can develop a toolbox, and you can develop a language of shared values. And for the participants to these assemblies, it has proven to be a transformative experience. They are given agency, they become communicators and agents of change in their own environments. They really engage not only as participants in the assembly, but they become initiators in their own home institutions. They are empowered to stimulate ongoing debate, and they are really becoming advocates for networks of care, as we call them. We have had 4 assemblies in the meantime, and all 4 of them have delivered, well, recommendations. I won't go into all of them, then Victoria will be very unhappy, so I have promised to be as short as possible. You can read as well, and if you are interested, of course, you can have this presentation afterwards, and then you can look into it more. So I will do this rather quickly. The first assembly came out with these 5 topics: create networks of care, foster dialogue, develop a glossary, engage in conversations on power, and empower students, teachers and staff. The second assembly, which these assemblies took place over the last 2 years, of course there came up the recommendation of strive for gender balance, raise awareness, create safe teaching and learning environments, which is a big topic in the conservatoires, I can tell you. Develop comprehensive policies and procedures, and overall, most of it communicate to each other about all these intricacies of power relations. The third assembly came up with create safe spaces for students, especially with students with disabilities, make training on disabilities mandatory, consult or employ trained diversity officers, develop sustainable financial support for students in need, and accommodate and support staff, prospective current students with disabilities. And the fourth assembly, the last one till now, and which concludes the project PRIhME, is about creating clear and transparent systems of assessment criteria, which is very much the basis of power relations between students and teachers, implement systematic examination approach, establish a forum dedicated to assessment, ensure external examiners are also qualified both as performance and pedagogues, and initiate performance classes to enable cross-faculty feedback. And these recommendations now are given out to the complete higher music education sector. And the last 2 slides are very quick. Perhaps you know Robert Chambers, and perhaps you know the famous video he made, I think about 10 years ago, about the elephant in the room. Yes, in 2013 it was much of an elephant in the room, but over the last decade it has changed, thank God, a lot. And Robert Chambers mentions 5 types of power. Power over people, which we all have to some extent, in our functions, for example. We have the power to do something, we have agency. We have collective power. We have the power within ourselves, like the feeling with, like it says here, the feeling within oneself, the capacity to do things, to be self-confident, so to say. And Chambers adds a fifth one, that's the power to empower. And he thinks that's the basic power we should use in order to come to a better power balance in institutions like our conservatoires. And that's convening power, that's how he calls it. And convening power is beautifully illustrated by these assemblies we have had, by a congress like we have. Call people together and discuss the problem, in this case of power relations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harrie. And actually, we have this little video of Robert Chambers actually explaining these powers. It's a 7-minute video. We thought we don't use it now, but we will share it with you afterwards. So if you are interested, you can have a little more thorough run-through of these. We'll continue with Martha Lomelí. You're doctor in social psychology. Sorry. Examining the relationship between society, culture, and people's subjective well-being. I thought that was well put. And you're engaged in the Play It Loud project, which you will present for us. So very happy to have you here.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. And I'm just going to put my timer so I don't speak for ages. And yes, so hi, thanks for having me here. I am Martha Lomelí. I go by she, her pronouns. And I'm going to quickly talk about a Play It Loud, a project by JMI and some partner organizations, which the overall objective is to tackle gender imbalances in the music sector, and as I just literally said. And how are we trying to do that? By expanding knowledge on barriers for access and participation in youth music / culture projects, and by proposing key mindsets, attitudes, and practices / actions that foster this participation and freedom of expression of currently underrepresented youth. So as Aysha was saying, like, we also take an intersectional approach. So we try to amplify the voices not only of all marginalized identities, which include women and gender expansive people, but is not limited to these identities. So Play It Loud has been like quite a process. So in 2021, we started with an online survey that it was sent to a bunch of organizations from 10 different countries. In the end, we had answers from 21 organizations. And in this questionnaire, we just asked, like, literally questions about representation in their own organization, and which barriers they identify for youth participating in their projects. And also what things have been helping for young people actually coming to their projects. Then that was happening at the same time as we invited young organizers from different countries to create a pilot activity that aim to tackle gender imbalances, or like aim to foster participation. And to do that, we pair them with a bunch of experts in different aspects of the music industry, so they could work together in the preparation of these events. And then we always kept collecting data, so all the data collection kept happening during the whole process. Then we had like an expert meeting when we started to have like more conversations about this. Like, we started like to identify like the things that the young organizers were like facing, what was working, what was not working, and that's how we developed the Play It Loud handbook. This is just a little bit of the pictures of the events that happen. Part of the Play It Loud effort to create more accessible music projects. And you can see there's a lot of different countries there. And then this year, the handbook was finally published and is accessible to all of you. And I will talk about the handbook a little bit more in the next slide. But right now, what I want to share with you is that we are in the second part of Play It Loud, which is called Play It Loud Crescendo. And it's what we're trying to do is to just like foster the use of the handbook. So we're training people on how to use the handbook and how to present it as a solution to make projects more accessible. And we just had the trainer of trainers in Grozny last May. And in July, we're going to have a capacity building training with, where we're going to invite young musicians to come and learn more what can they do being part of the industry to foster participation and just to basically stand up to sexism and all of these things that we're discussing. So the Play It Loud handbook, as I said, you can find it online. And it starts with key concepts and terminology that it's very important for like social justice concepts and gender-related concepts. Then we present a pedagogical framework, the norm-critical pedagogy, as the mindset to have when working in these projects. Then we present what I'm very proud of, the 5 Play It Loud building blocks. And what we say here is that if you look into 5 different aspects, which are knowledge, outreach, role models, community engagement, and accessibility, if your organization and if your projects looked into these 5 aspects when organizing stuff, it's likely that your project's gonna be more inclusive. And for that, we give like a guide of like why is it important, what was the background, and why we are saying that this is important, and also like key actions to take to foster each of these aspects. And that's my 5 minutes, and I'm literally finishing. Then we just have some appendices with like the results of the survey, and there is the website. Boom.
Wow. Well done.
I'm not gonna drop it.
Fantastic. And I know that the band camps in Norway are celebrating their 10th anniversary, so it's been...
Yeah, and this is called Play It Loud because of Loud. It's very based on Loud, the project in Norway, so yeah.
Thank you very much, Martha. We go on to Szonja.
Yeah, thank you.
You come with a lot of experience from the business world. You have worked for Telenor and lots of big companies, and you're involved in this Music Air funded project that you will present for us. So
Yes,
very happy to have you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a great opportunity. If you don't mind me standing up, it's just, that's what I, in companies, where I'm come from. So thank you very much for having me, and let me start by thanking you again for inviting us. So let me start by saying that our original project title was Female Music Producers for Equality and Inclusion Phase 1. So we decided to give a rather, shorter name. So this has become Project First Wave, which is a 1-year project, and it's basically a preparatory project for a longer term action plan and strategy we would like to execute. But more about what this is. So our goal is, and our objective is, to make female and non-binary music producers and songwriters to be involved and employed in an actively growing number in the industry. So basically creating gender balance. But even more than that, because we are focusing on everyone being part of the music production process in the popular music. So why, the question could raise why we are focusing on music production. So coming from the industry and also, reading lots of research and working with researchers, we found that music producers has a power position in case of in deciding how a team is going to be set up, but also they have a longer or a wider power in terms of how not just music production, but out of that, like how the gender composition is going to look like. And we found that if we increase the number of music producers, female non-binary producers, then we are going to be able to increase the overall number of female involvement and non-binary involvement in music. And it could actually kick off an incremental growth. I wouldn't come up with the numbers because we are very lucky to have Key Change here. And thank you very much for your presentation. And I think that they said everything, and you already know everything about where we are. We are very far. We are behind 3,000 years. So I think the more gender projects is the better, because there are no enough gender projects. Well, 3,000 years again. So how we are going to do this, and that's when the business mindset comes in. So basically, I could talk to you about why it's a business mindset, but that's another story. We can talk about it in the workshop, in the focus group. But basically, how we are going to execute our plan, how we are going to do this. So we created a holistic strategic plan, understanding that the market cannot be changed without understanding their needs. So basically, we understand that the music market is rapidly growing. So it grew by 10% last year, and it's probably going to achieve 30 billion this year. So it's a huge growth. More and more music is out on the market. So what should we do? What should we consider? We understand that we need to understand the business mindset first, because nothing is going to change if we are not delivering what business needs. So there are some help. So for example, in the European Union, there are the Sustainability Development Goals. These directives has to be implemented in the form of a quota if it comes to when it comes to diversity, but also when it comes to carbon footprint and etc. So we are using this opportunity to support companies to implement these quotas. We are specifically focusing on company policy development, which is actually an implementation, and then they can report this back to the European Union. This process will start probably around 2029 in the United States, but there are also projects and companies who are already on this track. I'm going to talk about that later. So in order to, once you have started, you are in a company, like a publishing company or a label, so you have this gender quota, but you don't have any female music producers, or say, like the quality you're looking for, because you obviously want to earn money. So what do you do? So we understand that we need to fill up the pool on the market, so we have to start an education, not just advocacy, but we are planning on the longer term to roll out mass education and a campaign very much similar to the IT sector, which was back then, coding is the new sexy. I think that was the campaign like 15 years ago. And just look at Apple, Google, Facebook, there are lots of women in IT now. Music production is very much like engineering, so it's kind of a technical work now. We will see what AI brings, but for now, this is the road, and therefore, there is a need for education. And we are also looking for partnering up with associations who are in higher education, in private education, and to talk about this, how we can extend the education for women. This basically will bring a growth in educated music professionals and music producers, mixing engineers, mastering engineers, songwriters. So therefore, we can fill up our pool of quota. But we also need to generate some market demand. Let's be honest. I mean, when you really want to do business, you have to have several strategies. So you have to generate some market need. So we understand that there are lots of big companies like Netflix, Amazon, and the others like HBO, Warner, and also the big telecommunication companies like Telenor. And all these companies are full of content, and content is moving the music industry. I think all of us know. So there are lots of film music, sync business is huge, not just the streaming business. So basically, once we reach, and they are big on gender equality, they already implemented, it's easier for them to implement, they have a completely different business model than music. Music is a very specific industry, I would say. So basically, once we get them into what we are calling gender-balanced music, to acquire gender-balanced music, so to actually extend their activity of gender balance, not only in the office, but how they are in their supply chain, we can put an extra push on the market. And this is going to have an extra push as going to it's not, I cannot show it with but a need for a growth. So then publishing companies, labels, libraries, etc. will have an urge to deliver on more gender-balanced music. And then we go back to the pool, you know, you have to increase your number until, I mean, the quota until we are becoming 50-50. So, and what are we going to do? So this is how we are going to do with the holistic, but these are like the outline of our main points. Some of them are going to happen this year, but I also included the longer-term plan. I will show you the last slide, well, only two slides left. So basically, what are we doing? We are going to, this year, developing gender quota strategy and consultancy for labels, publishing companies, and companies in the industry. We are going to launch mass education programs ourselves, hopefully. We'll see, depending on lots of other factors, but we are planning on mixing engineering, mastering engineering, music production, and also songwriting. This is free. It's free for everyone. So it's very important because we would like people to engage people, young people, to understand why is this a great area to work. It's joy, fun, and hopefully on the longer term we will be able to make them earn more. So exposure. So we are also focusing on exposing talent and releasing their music. What we are creating in our songwriting camps are, well, collaboration projects, let's say that. We are also doing inter-industry advocacy, which goes for education and also major music sourcing industries, such as film, TV, advertising. And the fifth is in our agenda, which we submitted to the European Union, is establishing the European Music Production Association, which is going to be a body that is actually going to support all music producers, including a man. And that's why I'm saying, like, balance, just as key change is trying to emphasize the word balance. It's not really about pushing female or something like that. It's more creating a balanced environment, because we will talk about it, I believe, in the panel. And also we are building our network on the longer term. So this is the long-term strategy. As you can see, it's 3 phases. So this year is Project First Wave, which we got funded by the European Union and Music News Europe. And on the longer term, we are going to execute Project Soundwave, which is going to execute some actions like education and the implementation part. And parallel to that, the Music Production Association is going to support this. So I just wanted to really, you to see that we have a multi-year, probably a forever project going on. And Sisters in Action, it's very, very important to say, I think that, as I said, there are no enough gender projects. We are 3,000 years behind again. So basically, the more projects we have with more focus on specific areas, I believe it's the better, because, you know, you cannot have like, you cannot sit in 20 horses by yourself. So basically, we are very happy and we are really honored to join the other gender projects like Key Change, and we really would like to cooperate. And also collaborate with the other gender projects. So I believe it's very important. And also to discuss a common long-term strategy, so maybe become like, you know, a team. I just wanted to bring up a great example of a huge, big label, which is Universal Music. We are working with Universal Music for a while now. And I'm talking about the US leg, not to confuse with the UK leg and the European one. So the US Universal Music Publishing has a lot of gender-focused initiatives, and they are pushing, they have a specific team for this, and they are pushing gender-balanced music to the market in form of sync and other thematic albums, which we are very, very happy for. And I just wanted to show you this because this was a very important inspiration for us in the project when we developed the longer-term strategy. So this last year project was a success in terms of having very high-quality music out on the market, done by female producers and our artists and songwriters. So this is something we are very proud for. I'm very happy to thank you very much for you coming here and listening to this presentation, and I certainly hope that we will be able to work together. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Szonja. very happy to have your project amongst our projects. So last but not least, Yohann, you're the director of FACE and director of operations on the Move, but you also led the working group on gender and power relations in the Shift project, which you will introduce to us.
Yeah, thank you. A quick description for participants with visual impairments. I'm a white man in my mid-40s, brown hair, graying hair, facial hair, and wearing glasses, orange glasses. My pronouns are he, him. I was not leading this, but I was really part of this and pushing together with many European organizations to work on sustainable development goals. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to talk about this Shift project, as it was a vibrant, really super interesting project for all the partners that were involved. And I see in the room Celia Fischer from the International Music Council. I see Sonia Greiner from Europa Cantat, European Choral Association, that contributed to this big project, coordinated by the European Music Council. And what a fantastic coordination. In this project, we focused on sustainable development goals and how European organizations like ours could actually better address them. So the idea was really to equip ourselves, and this is the 10 minutes of our existence. We were very selfish to try to really acquire knowledge, expertise, tools to be able to better help and support others. And in this process, we, of course, worked on several sustainable development goals, on climate action and environmental sustainability, on diversity and inclusion, and on the Sustainable Development Goal number 5, on gender equality. In this particular area, we felt urgent to focus on sexual harassment and power abuse. We felt that our group of organization could really do better, but also know better how to address these very particular sensitive issues of power abuse, sexual harassment. But also we felt that the 2017 Me Too movement traveled in very, very different way throughout the European context. And that even if in some countries like Sweden or Norway, already in 2017, many petitions, many voices were, screaming loud the problem and describing really bad behavior and bad professional practices. In many other contexts in Europe, that was not the case. And during our process and research, we realized quite quickly that in many countries, especially in the eastern part of Europe, the Me Too movement peaked in 2021, so many years later. In this area and research area, we wanted to address the conversation in different ways, and we've heard already this morning many keywords that were very important to have in mind doing this research. This research consisted of course, starting conversation through one of the partners, Elia, very active in higher education in the arts, having surveys, having focused conversation, but also for all of us to lead interviews with cultural leaders that had direct lived experience with trying to not solve, but address and find very concrete solutions. One of the main takeaways or the main issue that we identified is, of course, that this very long-term process to work on gender equality, but also to address and create the right frames to address sexual harassment and power abuse are always happening when there is a crisis. So we navigate the crisis, the accusations, the media attention, and at the same time try to have a process that takes time. And it takes time because it takes conversation, it takes group effort. It takes debunking or, opening the Pandora box of terminology. What do we understand by these words or these behaviors? And these take time. So as part of the takeaways of this very, very interesting process for all of us, we tried to identify a couple of key points and published very, short documents. Not only, I have lost this, yeah. Not only PDF to download from the shift-culture.eu website, but also bibliographies pointing out codes of conducts and charters, trying to point out existing resources from other artistic sectors or universities, etc. I would say, if I need to take a couple of takeaways, is that as we heard already this morning, the idea of training is very important, and we, as cultural leaders, but what we observe also through, European networks, federation, unions, etc., we need to be trained. And this notion of training really find its roots in the idea that we, as leaders, don't know everything. And we are not supposed to know everything, but we are supposed, and we have the responsibility to be better leaders. So to be better at, addressing gender-based violence. And the second takeaway I would like us to have, that I would like to take, is also, apart from the training, many of the interviewees we had, or the answers we collected from surveys, insisted on the loneliness aspect. We expect from cultural leaders to solve everything, which creates frustration, anger, and the idea that the leaders shouldn't be alone. So movement, and I really enjoyed your presentation, the idea of group action, finding support within organization, but also within the field, the music field and beyond, is very important. So the idea that we collectively share the responsibility and not just point out, the leader of a university or the director of a festival, etc. I will stop here, and I will encourage everybody to go to shift-culture.eu website to download these very short documents, or long ones if you have time, and delve into the very interesting material that not only the Shift partners put together, but also contributors like Marta Kale or Katie Carrigy-Watts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yohann. So I see time is flying, but I think we also started a bit late. So we will go into a few questions, and we'll see how much time we have to open up the floor. But anyway, we have the coffee break. So, but I wanted to go into this, that how can we make sure that this is now implemented? All the handbooks and the recommendations, the strategies, how can we make sure that they are implemented? I give it to you first, but all of you.
The implementation or enforcement is really connected to participation and accountability. So to be able to hold accountable everybody in position of power is very important. There is a democratic principle here. If you are a board of an organization, leader of an organization, employee, etc., you should be accountable for the pledges that you sign or the declaration that you make. So to ask the question is always good. But again, participation is key. The notion of keeping the momentum, which is the tricky part in our society, is when we see the media attention vanishing from, this important topic from one day to the next. So keeping the momentum through participation, for me, is one of the answers.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'll be quick. I believe that the implementation is, in our case, or in gender quota case, it's a huge help that the European Union has this directive. So basically, there's that. But also, I think it involves education of the company. So it's not enough when you're implementing this into your processes and you start reporting. So you're basically being forced, but at the same time, you have to educate people in not just the industry, but within the environment where you implement this, to live by that rule. But at the same time, implementation of, speaking of gender quotas, it's very, I think the first step, like a pledge, it's a huge help in order to start to kick off this process. But once you start to implement, it looks like very like, it's a corporate process. You go in, you understand the company, you understand the processes, and then you actually develop something longer term, staged policy, and then you just introduce that to the family. Well, it's good to go to the family as well. But you introduce that to the company, and then once the board approves, they start to report it, and then comes education of the company. But this is kind of a very like dry process, I would say. Well, except the education part.
Thank you. Harrie?
Well, yes, I would like to add that I like the term mass education. I'm quite used to mass extinction, but mass education is much better. Thank you. I think that's really key to answering your question, Victoria, because as, for example, the Association of European Conservators, AEC, has had always the problem that they are developing beautiful work and handbooks and whatever, but then it stays in Brussels. And we had yesterday a presentation by Monica about the diversity and inclusion working group from Artemis, and they are going to take this not only to a website, but are going to take it to the institutions. And I think that's a far better way of implementing policies and change. And in this case, like we had now the assemblies, you really involve and students and teachers and administrative staff. And if you are going to do that in every country, in every group of institutions, and you involve everyone, then you are really aiming for change. But you should do it. It's an action. It's not a paper. It's not good intentions. You have to do it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, because yesterday I was in the Artemis presentation and I picked up the wonderful phrase, embrace the resistance. I thought it was wonderful. And I'm very happy that this is actually the only panel in this morning, that it's not a parallel session, because my experience is often with these panels, all the women go, all the non-binary, and then if there's another choice, well, it leads back to Stefan's questions, how many men signed. So my question is, how do we make this question important to everyone? How do we mass educate when it's voluntarily to use the handbooks? So how do we reach out, and how do we make this a question for everyone? As you said, it's not the women's fight, it's about balance. So I don't know. Martha, would you like?
Yeah, so I was still thinking in the other question, and so it's unfortunate that as the brown person I didn't get to answer it.
Please answer both.
Just but this is the kind of stuff that we just need to reflect on. And I'm not implying anything, but these things happen, and this is what my answer goes. Why are you here? With the information that we are presenting you, what are you gonna do with it? What's your personal commitment? Implementation comes from the top down and with the bottom up. So we can talk about policies, we can talk about what the organizations say, but now that you are here, what are you going to do with this? And how much are you committed to confront your own biases, your own work, your own privilege, your own power, and what are you going to do with it? So I think that it kind of addresses the two questions.
And can I ask you then, how do we then identify our own power? Can you?
Yeah, well, yeah.
You can go on.
Well, first you need to have information. The thing with privilege is that when you have it, you don't have to question it. So when it goes invisible and just it's the reality, it's the way it is. is when you don't have power, when you start to question things. So the first thing that could be done is like listen to people who don't look like you and listen to what they are saying. If I'm, as a brown person, saying that these things exist, it's time to just listen and start the conversation with yourself and with others from there.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to go into the how do we make this urgent for everyone?
Yes. Well, of course, I can talk from our perspective, but when it comes to, it's not about the urgency, but when you think about profits, sorry, everyone, you know, when there's a balance in team, you're innovating faster, so you can expect higher growth in terms of revenues. We shouldn't talk about profits, but let's say revenues. So I think innovation and revenues are a very important part of the music business overall. And you can see, as a very smart person said, there are the films with female actors who are earning a lot more. I mean, the films are making a lot more than the films with male actors, according to some research I heard from someone. But I think it's a very important point. So once you decide on the gender balance of your team, or the gender composition of whatever team, I think this is something that's worth considering, even though I think it's hard to explain why, because of it should be a default, in my opinion. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Do you feel that you have to explain what are the benefits of gender balance in your work? No.
No, in general, I don't feel the need to advocate this theme in at least my environment, because we are not at the beginning of this theme. We are already 10, 15 years working on it. So I think the theme itself is widely accepted, but that's something different than really take up action upon the changes needed to fulfill the needs of this theme. And there we have still a very long way to go. So I think that's the problem for now.
I'm still puzzled by the question, because I mean, the very notion of asking, is there any benefit, is like, is there any benefit of not being racist? I mean, that's not a question of rights. I mean, this is a question of rights and human rights and equality, and that's it. I mean, there's nothing to discuss here, in a way. But to go back to this question, I feel we need a little bit of top-down sometimes. So I believe in participation, in the critical mass of activists, but also citizens voicing concerns and participating in change. But I believe also in the top-down. The ministries of cultures and arts council saying, if you want to have public funding, then you will need to tick these boxes. So sometimes when there is a bit of resistance or lack of awareness, you need to have, the top-down approach and say, okay, if you want to get a grant for whatever project, well, you will need to show me that not only you have a code of conduct or, a charter, but also that you apply it, that you implement it, and you will have to demonstrate it in order to get funding. Not to get funding, to be eligible to funding. So the idea that sometimes, and the same can go in, for climate change, for many other emergencies that we have in society, we need to have a bit of this, top-down approach sometimes.
Nudges.
Yeah, it works.
So I have a question for Martha, because you do bands camps for girls, and I know you get this question, but I want to raise it anyway. What benefits do you see from a group having the chance to be isolated, or what to say? And do you see any negative, or do you get negative comments or about this?
Yeah, sure. So a little bit of background. I work in girls' rock camps, and the name is a little bit misleading now because in reality there are spaces for women, but also like trans and gender expansive people. So and yeah, within these spaces, like we literally just like accept participation of people who identify with this within this identities. So if we're talking about inclusion and access and all that, of course I get the question like, but you are actually segregating people by just creating these like women or gender expansive spaces. And is that not like contributing to the problem? And you know, there's quite a bit of a pushback in this type of initiatives. So my answer to that is that, well, yes, we're just giving this space, but to think about it is like the real world, like the world outside these bubbles, the safe space is for men. So the men literally have like most of the, and this is not saying that it's completely safe for men, but in terms of what I'm trying to say is that this is the world is made more for the safety and the empowerment of men. So in these spaces, what we want to show is like, how would it feel like when this pressure or these forces are not influencing the way you express, the way you conduct yourself, like all the things that the societal pressure puts on people who don't identify as cis men. And yeah, because like if you don't get to experience that, how can you really see what is it like? What's their capacity? This is something, I don't know if you have been part of like a women's only or spaces literal with no cis men. The dynamics are different, and it just feels like more empowering for such identities. But another very important thing that I say is that, and this is just like the brain that always goes into binaries, is not saying that then we're trying to create like a complete switch where we're just turning the things around. This gender inequality has to be tackled and must be tackled from different fronts. So like we can have rock camps that are like inclusive of all genders, and like to teach in these rock camps like how to address these power dynamics, and just like, you know, to have people who actually know how to address this in a mixed camp. We can also have these spaces, but there can be projects of all types and still working towards the same goal. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. There's space for all, and we need all these type of projects.
Thank you so much. So I think it's my last question, just building on this before we open up. But yeah, so how do we create safe spaces, but we still foster dialogue?
Creating safe space and foster dialogue. My advice, and this is one of the outcomes of the Shift actually project, is not to do one-off. So the conversation we have here now is probably a conversation that should happen regularly. And, you know, like it's normal to talk about gender equality, and let's continue at the next European forum, etc., etc. So part of this is to make sure that they are always, the conversation is ongoing, because in a way it's a journey, it's a walk. You know, we walk toward a goal. So the idea is that this walk and this trajectory will not be linear because of the intersectionality of many of the issues. So we will always navigate, even if we have a goal, the pathway is not linear. So the importance of maintaining regular conversation is also just for this, because in the pathway, I feel we always need to include more or new elements. Yeah.
I think for some people who are managing music businesses, mainly men, is a safe space when you start a conversation from the business perspective, from the financial perspective, and that's when, you know, you can start saying like, this is what lots of big telecommunication and media companies are doing. They're introducing their gender quota, or not just quota, but their gender balance program, but they are strictly focusing on hiring the best talent. So they're actually creating a competition. And this is something that business leaders are very convenient with. And I believe that's a very good point for everyone to feel safe that they are going to be able to deliver, because that's the biggest pressure on a business leader. So from that perspective, from publishing and label perspective, I think this is something that is a big help when you approach from this angle.
Harrie, do you have any last, or we open up?
Well, I agree. It's a trajectory, and perhaps it's a longer march than we wish, but it's most important to keep moving. And I think frapper toujours is I think, the most important thing, like you said. And I think we have devised several ways in which we can do that in all of our situations. So I think if the leadership is really intending to do that, then we will be able to make the march perhaps a little bit shorter.
And I'm going to give a workshop on that, so if you are interested in knowing more.
So let's open up if there are any questions.
Thanks. Yvan from France and from Utopia Music. It's half a remark and a question to you guys. Thanks for all the incredible feedbacks and experience and insights you brought. I would like to tackle something about allyship. I used to be in charge of DEI in my company. We are a tech startup, so we are between music and tech. So imagine the diversity inclusion question is quite something. And I'm a white 40-year-old man, and I was leading this topic. And we found out that what you said, incentive, is also showing that diversity works in terms of it creates more innovation, more capacity to deliver and to be accurate in our global world. And me, my family is diverse, so it's not even a question, it's by default, as you said. But then, to me, it was challenging. I told my team, me leading that, I feel like I'm struggling. And because I was not feeling in position to be the leader of that topic. And we designed an allyship program. And it was really interesting, but quite challenging as well. So my question is, do you have example of a allyship program also that will make possible for the people in the position of power right now, men, and to feel part of the thing and to be incentivized to be part of the conversation, not just, so yeah, that kind of question.
Wow. If I may start, well, first of all, I think it's amazing that you are the one who's leading it, and you shouldn't feel, I think it's great. In terms of allyship, I mean, what we can say is that what I saw from within companies, when I work with Telenor, I know it's not the music industry, but they had this women network, a global network within the company. But they are, of course, Norway, I believe, is a little bit different than the rest of the world from this, and also the Netherlands, because they started very early. So, because I'm actually expanding this gender question to like all industries at this point, but my experience that there are like, it's not an incentive program, but who is within or women support networks, it's a partial, I think it's slightly different. But if you have any other, like if you have allyship examples?
I mean, on me, I come from the performing arts, and the independent performing arts, which means the commercial aspect or the business aspect is really not the main characteristic of our sector, which is very, charity-led, non-for-profit-led. And in the performing arts field, what I could observe in the past years is that the balance we are struggling, or the imbalance we are struggling with, is that there are less men than women. So, and it's difficult to have this discourse of, we need to bring more men in the field. It is a bit a weird conversation to have. However, the allies are there, and in our field, I feel male leaders are convinced by this. We don't need to convince them. So it looks like less doom and gloom from my perspective, although we don't have these data and statistics at European level. We don't have these many projects that we heard this morning. So we don't have the same amount of initiatives supported by national or European sources to actually foster gender equality. But at the same time, the reality in our field is that there is an imbalance that is. So the allies are, in a way, already there. And at many levels, at national level at least, in Western and Nordic countries, I would say the leadership, board members, etc., are predominantly female in our cultural organization or in performing arts organization. So again, the conversation is a bit different in that sense.
If I may just say one comment, which I don't know how did I forget, but there is an allyship, and especially because we're just starting off, we are just starting with this program, but now, as I talked about the quota execution, we are working together with big consultancy firms, and they're actually supporting our work. It's like Deloitte or KPMG, or we are also talking with McKinsey. The reason is we are working with them, and their kind of alliances, they have internal female leadership and women support programs, but they're also big on sustainability. And these firms doesn't have much to do with music because they are mostly operating above 30 billion industries, but it's a big industry though. But they are supporting us in our ESG policy implementation, which is very much, the industry is not too familiar with it, but we brought them all into the program because we believe that their name is kind of a guarantee for successful implementation of the quotas for that. And the other thing that I mentioned during my presentation, that we're very much looking forward for alliances, not just among and with other gender programs, because I think that we need a huge alliance within, and I can see some with Women in Music is collecting. Also, I saw Key Changes partnering up with lots of other gender programs. So basically, there are some alliances going on, and I think that in a very short amount of time, we will see global movements to kick off many alliances. Thank you.
I don't know, Martha, if you wanted to comment or no. But I think your question is also, it was partly answered by both the power to empower. The thing that someone in power is asking this question is already a start. And what you said about listening, taking leadership, and because I saw numbers, I don't remember the numbers yesterday, but women and men in a survey were asked if gender balance is a problem, and I don't remember if it was 83% of women thought it was a problem, but 39% of men. So it's also about how do we tackle a problem when some don't even see it, But I think asking the questions is a good start. So, and any other questions? Szonja.
Thank you, Sonja Greiner from the European Choral Association. It's more a comment. I would agree with Yohann that you need a combination of the bottom-up and top-down, at least in some cases, like organizations that are membership organizations and that curate the contents of events, because the bottom-up don't get to the top by themselves. So, for example, if we have elections, if our member organizations don't put up female candidates, I cannot have half the board female because it's a democratic association. So I have to actually work from the top on my member organizations to encourage them to put up more female candidates, which in turn means that in their country they have to have this awareness. So we have a difficulty in democratic organizations, yet we have to kind of try to put some pressure from the top to encourage them to have the bottom up in their respective countries. And I've been telling some people, we had a really interesting discussion in our board last week about composition for women composers. and some women from our board were not there, so we had a male majority. And some of the male people said, but it's discriminatory to support a competition for women composers, and we don't see why this is necessary because there are no barriers to women composing nowadays. And all the women in the room went like, what? And we said only a man can say that, and there's something like internal barriers. Of course, nobody tells you you're not allowed to compose, but it was a really interesting moment for me because it really showed this thing that Victoria was talking about, the difference of awareness. And it also means that we have to talk about it in every context where we are curating contents. And I sometimes say if I want to commission works and I give a music commission 5 minutes, they will come up with 9 male composers. If I give them half an hour, they will come up with 5 female and 5 male composers. So I have to have space, I have to talk about it, I have to raise awareness for it, or it will never change.
Thank you. Okay, so I get the sign that we are well into the coffee break, but thank you all for your presentations, and I hope you use the coffee break to go on. As you said, it's an ongoing work that we have to keep up. Let's walk the talk. Let's engage in conversations, and I encourage you all to be in the focus groups after the coffee break, because I think they will be really, really interesting. So thank you, all of you. Thank you.